Please welcome Pip Cross, Clayton Daniels, Chairman Mike Kelly, and Councilmember Greg Shelton.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Pip Cross. I'm from Marshall Sustainability, and we're a consultancy that works with businesses on sustainability strategy and how to communicate it. And wow, what a year that we've had. We've had lots of clients ask us, is sustainability still, or is it still sustainable to talk about sustainability? So what better topic for our panel today to address that very question? And I've got an incredible panel here with you today. Greg Shelton, Clayton Daniels, and Mike Kelly. And I'm going to hand it to them. Yes, yeah, they deserve a round of applause. And they've let me know that I can ask them any question. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. And we're really going to tackle this moment that we're in, this uncertain future, and how do you meet this moment where we are. And I guess the key challenge is around the business case for sustainability. What is that business case and how do you talk about it? We're going to bring up some real life case study examples. I've worked in this sector for maybe 15 years, and when I first started working with corporates, we would have to start every meeting with the business case for sustainability and outline why it made sense. We moved on a bit. We might be back there again talking about why this matters. And so I'm so glad to hand it over to Greg to introduce what he does and get us going today.
Thank you, Pip. Thanks. Thank you, Pip. Greg Shelton. So I'm here wearing two hats today. I'm an elected official in the city of Prairie Village. I serve on our city council there. And I also am the head of sales and marketing for Henderson Companies, which does engineering, consulting, and construction, specifically focused on commercial and industrial facilities across the country. So excited to be here with you all today and talk about this topic.
All right. Excuse me. My name is Clay Daniels, so I'm the president of U.S. Engineering Service. That's the service company for U.S. Engineering, which is a mechanical contractor here in Kansas City. Grew up here in Kansas City native. Went to U.S. Military Academy, was in the military for 10 years. Came back here to Kansas City where I'm raising my family and proud to be part of U.S. Engineering.
Thanks, Clayton. Hi, Mike Kelly. Good to see everybody again. Show of hands real quick. Who's at their 4th Climate Action Summit? God, it's amazing. Thank you all so much for the continued support. It's like a family reunion here today. I am a former chair of Climate Action KC. I am an attorney with the law firm of Hutch Blackwell, and I'm also the chair of Johnson County, Kansas. So, hey. I've got a day pass at least to come to the Show Me Surrounds here. So excited to be here and looking forward to a good conversation.
Great. Well, let's get it started. Our first question is for Clay. I mean, the original business case for sustainability was efficiency, this idea that we would all save lots of money through higher performance. Can you share some examples from the work at US Engineering around how that's coming to life?
Absolutely. I could probably talk about this for an hour, and I've got about 5 minutes here. So U.S. Engineering, we're a mechanical contractor, so we build mechanical systems in buildings. I think when we first started this presentation, you saw that mechanical systems in buildings have gone down about 34% in the last 10 years or so as far as carbon emissions go. But in buildings, mechanical systems make up roughly 30 to 50% of the utility or energy spend in buildings. So U.S. Engineering, we install, repair, service, and maintain those mechanical systems. So you can imagine our business is built around how do you build it faster, build it more efficiently, how do you do that safely, how do you do that with high quality, and to ensure that those systems run efficiently. So me, I'm president of the service company. We have about 150 service technicians around not only just Kansas City, but Wichita, Manhattan, Kansas, Springfield, Missouri, and then Denver, Colorado. They all have trucks, they all have gas, and they're all out there servicing these facilities, okay? So when you think about that, you can imagine how many miles get put on those trucks on a daily basis, a lot. So what can we do to streamline our business to be more efficient, and then ultimately provide value to our clients and reduce their total cost of ownership. And that's something that is a rallying point around U.S. engineering is TCO, total cost of ownership. And a huge part of that is the cost of energy and facilities. So that is our goal. That's our mission. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the creative things we're doing at U.S. Engineering that involves technology, processes. So when you think about preventative maintenance and historical preventative maintenance, typically the manufacturer of a piece of equipment will tell you how often you should inspect that piece of equipment, how often you should maintain that piece of equipment. And a lot of times when you look at a contract in one facility, there's multiple different types of equipment in that facility. They have different cadences on when you're supposed to inspect those. So what if you could do that virtually, right? What if you could do that without rolling a service technician out there to physically put their hands on, and you could do that where you're only inspecting that piece of equipment when it really needs maintenance or really needs to be inspected. So there's actually technologies out there right now, and this is what's fun about our industry. It's constantly evolving. There's technologies that are out there right now that sit on top of building automation called data analytics that can help prioritize when you go roll a truck out to a facility to take care of a piece of equipment. So that's something that we're heavily involved in right now. So I mentioned 150 technicians. You add 500 client sites in there, okay, that we actually have preventive maintenance contracts. Add another 1,000 client sites that don't have preventive maintenance contracts but still call us to have service. How can you do that with technology, with speed, and do it efficiently? And I'll tell you, it's a business model. It's fun, because ultimately it's our goal to reduce that energy spend, reduce that total cost of ownership, and reduce the cost for our clients to maintain their facilities. So when you look at the business case, it is absolutely 100% important for businesses to be sustainable, because they're literally reducing their spend. They're reducing how much money they're spending on their equipment. And then on top of that, each piece of equipment has a life cycle, right? ASHRAE is something that, Henderson engineers and engineers out there will understand what that means, but it basically it comes up with a model based off a type of equipment and what the average lifespan of that piece of equipment is. What if we could make that last 5 years longer? Or what if we could identify an opportunity to, instead of make a repair on that old piece of equipment, actually replace it with a return on investment for that client, where it actually is less than the time you would replace it eventually. So that's what we do. That's our business model, and super pumped about the direction of where that's going and where analytics are going. So.
Thanks for that, Clay. It sounds like it's the perfect storm of technology, AI, data analytics, and cost savings for your clients. So a real business model. I don't know, Greg, if you've got anything to add there from your perspective at Henderson.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of terms in our industry that get thrown around. I think one that has become fairly ubiquitous is called value engineering. And a lot of that gets kind of scooped up into this conversation about efficiency. Value engineering has evolved, in my opinion, in the last few years from how do we get costs down to how do we increase performance at or just above traditional cost. And that's, I think, an important shift in this conversation when you think about what the end game is here. We're moving from a market that has traditionally prioritized, I need the cheapest box you can build me, to I need the highest performing box you can build me. And I think that as we move from the recent past and our current present into the next 5 and 10, 15 years out, that is something that all of us need to start to talk more about, is that low cost is being replaced by high performance.
Great. And I know Jeremy mentioned it in his opening address, just some of the regulatory pressure that's coming around performance, around buildings. I don't know, Mike, if you have a perspective on that.
Well, I think it's an incredible opportunity. With regulation, it's kind of been a double-edged sword. And I think it's been important for the climate movement over the last 20, 30 years. Regulation has been so important to help keep our air clean, to keep water quality where it needs to be. There's now the other side of the sword, in that regulation has become something that's utilized by opponents of growth, by opponents of density, by opponents of efficiency, and lawyers, and it takes one to know how terrible they can be, right? Have become not only a friend in the fight, but oftentimes a foe. And so if we're going to get, as Ashok was talking about earlier today, through the arbitrary regulatory process as it comes through energy, if we're going to be able to get better energy efficiency into our buildings, it's going to take a marked effort to make sure that the regulations that we're putting in aren't completely non-existent, but also aren't intentionally harmful towards the growth that we need. What I don't want to see us become is the argument toward forced scarcity. Instead, I think the growth that we can have is the growth that we all want to see. A clean energy future, abundant, clean energy, opportunities for our kids and our grandkids to have those careers in future industries that are life-affirming and sustaining. But to be able to do so, we need to meet the moment on the regulatory side.
So less regulation? Is that what you're saying?
Smarter regulation.
Smarter, good idea.
Streamlined regulation.
And I wonder, Clay, we talked in the pre-call about some interesting experiences you'd had in Colorado around their building performance standards and the impact that that had on your business. Could you share that anecdote for us?
Sure. So I'm not the expert. In fact, but I do have a director of energy and sustainability who sits in our Colorado office who is. And what occurred in Colorado, there's specifically the city of Denver and the state of Colorado had energy standards, and there was essentially legislation put out there with milestones to ultimately achieve certain levels of energy savings. The mark that they utilize there is called the Energy Usage Intensity rating, which that rating ultimately, and if there's any engineers out there, I apologize for butchering it, but it's basically your score, it's your scorecard. The lower the better. And ultimately what they did is they looked at all the different types of buildings in, for example, the city of Denver and said, okay, these fall in this category. This falls under healthcare, but it's a medical office building, not a central plant, so there's different standards for that. And they put together goals for the EUI for each one of those different facilities, and then milestones along the way from a legislation perspective to achieve those. I believe at this point there's been some litigation around that with different groups, and ultimately one of the challenges was at the beginning was the city of Denver and the state of Colorado weren't necessarily they weren't on the same page. There's some different standards in both. Now they are. So there's some positives there. And I believe when you look at the first goal is essentially benchmarking your building. Why would you not want to do that? Why would you not want to know where your building stands compared to other buildings like yours? Because guess what? You could be saving a lot of money if you just get the right people in there to support that building. So that's where it's at right now, and I think it's progressing there. But happy to have a offhand conversation, get you pointed in the right direction with the right guy.
And didn't you mention that in terms of your business practices, those benchmarks helped you see where you had opportunities for improvement?
Oh, absolutely, and we did that in all of our facilities. In fact, Brandon Wyckoff is sitting over there somewhere. Brandon is currently the president of U.S. Engineering Metalworks, and we have two very large manufacturing facilities. One's in Denver, Colorado, Johnstown, just north of Denver, and one in Lawrence, Kansas. And we ultimately we wanted to do what we say we're doing for our clients, and we're really working hard to make those more energy efficient. And we do, we benchmark those. We made efforts towards achieving less energy spend. There's a whole lot more into manufacturing and what we're doing from an environmental perspective there to support that. But yeah, and I did want to hit on jobs though. Like you mentioned jobs. One thing that's interesting in the who would have ever thought in the HVAC industry you'd have a data scientist that worked for you. And that's kind of that's the direction we're starting to go. Is we have a junior energy engineer who's looking at data and ultimately going to help drive the right person to the right job site to take care of a problem with the right skill set based off the data they're seeing. Person sits in Colorado, but supporting work in the entire organization, you know, in Springfield, Missouri, or Wichita, Kansas. So it is interesting to see how, you know, maybe AI takes away a job because it's more efficient, but then another job is created that provides more value to our clients. So it's just interesting to see how that's happening. That wouldn't have happened without, you know, the direction of energy and sustainability for our organization and just the clients that we serve. So
I think it's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of sometimes constraints or rules or regulations can force you to innovate and think of new ways of doing things, smarter ways of doing things. And I know, Greg, you always have a perspective on everything, but particularly this topic. Can you share some thoughts here?
Guilty. So I think when it comes to innovation, you know, we are operating in an environment where that is not just an activity for the sake of the activity itself. It is increasingly important from an existential perspective, both on a national and global scale. We are in the midst of what many will refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. If you're not familiar with that as a topic, what that is principally being driven by is technology. And so we're at a point in time where businesses have to stay up to speed on, now it's AI. Before it was like, okay, how do I use, you know, store large amounts of data and data sets in the cloud? And then previous to that it was about networking, and then previous to that it was about devices, right? So we're coming into the latter stages of this technological innovation era. So now it's going to be important on us as businesses to think about how do we operationalize that in a way that is meaningful and efficient and delivers value. So when we go out into the world, when you come out of this talk today, you know, and you're talking to people about innovation, it's a very broad term, but try to bring it back home to that sort of simple point, that sustainable innovation is about finding the best value. And I think that when we talk to folks who maybe aren't as steeped in these subjects as we are and aren't as passionate about it even, what they do care about is how does this help, you know, provide me growth opportunities in my career? How does this help my retirement portfolio expand and grow in a sustainable, meaningful way? That's what this is ultimately about. When we talk about innovation, we've got to bring it back home to that simple perspective so that people understand that this isn't just an ivory tower conversation. There's real meaningful benefit, but we have to stick with it, and we got to get the work done.
And I think to that and building on that, when we try to make the business case for sustainability, I think we have a great argument to make on dollars and cents. And I think you've heard that from both professionals here. And I think especially, Pip, you mentioned that having to go back to that business case in the political climate that you may find yourself in, you can speak dollars and cents. And I think that piece is important. While at the same time, it's not just about inputs, it's about outcomes. And one of the things I think that has been so powerful about Climate Action KC and the work that we've done is we focus not just on the cost savings, but the co-benefits. Sometimes those things are a little bit more difficult to quantify, but not just when you think about all good things, sometimes they're difficult to measure. And I'll screw up the phrase, but sometimes those things that matter can't be measured. Those things that measure don't really matter as much. But when you look at community health, when you look at building health, when you look at the things that you're bringing to a community, those co-benefits are also things that we should be talking about. And I think those outcomes-driven conversations are really what can speak to a lot of people who don't want to get into the granular detail of the industry innovation. I think they can still understand that if you have better air quality, you're going to have a better life. And so focusing on those outcomes, I think, really gives us a great opportunity to continue a sustainability conversation, even in a difficult political climate.
I think that's really important. And I think also, the language that we use is really important. And I know the panel after us is going to delve deep into that. But really focusing on the benefits and what they are for the different communities that you're talking to is really where we're headed in terms of this business case. But I think the innovation point is really interesting. I mean, EVs, we heard in the introduction, is a big part of the story for Kansas City going forward. And I know, Mike, that you've been really involved in that. Could you share a bit more around that?
Well, innovation grows upon itself, right? Like, we are so excited here in just a few months to open the biggest battery factory in North America that's going to be supplying electric vehicle batteries for the majority of the United States. And that's good in and of itself. Like, we are excited for 4,000 jobs. We're excited for $4 billion of investment into DeSoto. And we're excited for the careers that will be directly inside of the Panasonic facility. What I'm so excited about is the residual growth, because it's not just Panasonic who's coming to town. H&T Recharge will also be coming to DeSoto. It's a European company who builds a component of the battery chassis. Redwood Materials, who is part of the circular economy for recycling the batteries and the chassis, is also coming to DeSoto. You're seeing different suppliers come around the chain for Panasonic. And because of that, it's allowing us as policymakers to move forward with goals that we have for our community that otherwise wouldn't be possible in a difficult political climate. Not to get too deep in the weeds, but I'll mention one. We want to create a 24/7 tariff in Kansas that allows customers who choose to do so to be able to buy 24/7, 365 clean energy in their homes. Having companies like Panasonic, like H&T Recharge, like Redwood Materials, all of which share climate goals and priorities, 2050, even 2040 goals of net zero, allows us a customer base and a political will to push forward that 24/7 tariff. And that is not just that, it's other policy goals as well. So innovation building upon itself gives us policy considerations as well.
Yeah. So a strong business case for Kansas City for EVs. So hopefully more hands raised at next year's summit for who's driving an EV currently.
Sure hope so.
Great. Well, I want to just kind of pivot now to the question of resiliency. And I know, Greg, you have some opinions on this based on your experience with the Prairie Village City Council.
Yes, so with resilience in particular, we had a very acute example that came to our attention just last year. So every year as a city, right, we own property. We have parks, we have facilities, we have equipment. And so we have to ensure that, right? Those are assets, and we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing and ensuring against the risk that comes with owning those assets. Last year, our insurance provider every year comes to us and informs the city council of what that renewal looks like from a cost perspective, from a coverage perspective. And last year, it really stood out to myself and several other members of the council when we saw in the line item of the renewal for property insurance increase was 45% in 1 year. It went up by 45%. And so we pressed our insurance broker on why the sudden increase. And you could tell he was hesitant to share that reason. And I ultimately pressed him to the point where I made him have the conversation with our council that it was climate change. And I think that in that moment, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to go there, because for the ones of people that were watching that meeting, right? Am I really going to get the point across? But at that moment, I knew it was being recorded, and I knew that the point mattered enough that it needed to be made. That, Ashok was up here earlier talking about force factors and how risk is a force factor. And that is so important too, as you walk out of this room today, to be able to talk about that there are real manifest consequences that we are paying for today. So when we talk about a carbon tax, you're not getting it from the federal government, you're getting it from the private sector, and it's coming mostly to you in the way of insurance premiums. And the more that you can talk about that, that's real. People feel that. And whether it's 30%, 45%, or in some cases, if you live in Florida or California, you're being told, we can't afford to insure you anymore. And for those of you who don't know, that market, and the reason why a lot of that coverage is being canceled or dropped, is because insurance companies participate in what's known as a reinsurance market. And there's a grand total of 4 companies on planet Earth that provide that level of reinsurance to your insurance company. So regardless if you're with Travelers, State Farm, Amica, whomever, right, they're going out and they're reinsuring the risk that they took on from you. So when we talk about resilience, right, you need to think about how the market is actually dealing with the risk that comes from climate change today, because that risk is global. It's not just Kansas City. It's not just Kansas or Missouri. We are seeing the impacts of this from all corners of the world. As Carl Sagan once said, those of you who don't know who Carl Sagan is, he's a physicist, but as Carl Sagan once said, carbon molecules are really stupid. They don't know where boundaries are. They go up into the atmosphere and they go everywhere. And so we're dealing with that. So when you think about how can I be more resilient as an individual, as a member of a community, as a part of my company, just know that the challenge that we're facing, the carbon molecules that we're working against, don't care where you live. They don't care if you don't own a home. They're going to impact you one way or another, because that is what they do.
Wow. from insurance, I think, yes. From Carl Sagan to the reinsurance industry. And there was a really interesting article that came out this week from Alliance, who is one of those top 4 reinsurance brokers. And they are saying that the world is headed for the 3 °C warming, and it's going to have a massive impact on different insurance markets. So again, back to Mike's point about dollars and cents, that's where it's going to hurt all of us and our businesses. So just thinking about resiliency in Johnson County, Mike, do you have any thoughts to share as well on how that's impacting you?
Well, it's impacting us across the board. And we formed a sustainability coalition in Johnson County, and we have some incredible professionals that serve on that committee. And it's really helpful to allow that to be an undercurrent of just about everything we do, because it affects just about every department that we have. And I've been very encouraged by being able to tap into the leadership in the private sector and allow us to help make better policy determinations, whether it be for the building health that we have. In a really difficult time with property taxes, and if there's any homeowners here in Johnson County, I know property tax is a very top concern. Being able to help alleviate the increasing property taxes we have when the state legislature takes away other mechanisms by which we can fund local government, which is a nerdy conversation we can have later. But we need to find other mechanisms by which to alleviate that concern. Building health and energy efficiency is a huge part of that. So whether it's that, whether it's an EV charging master plan that we have throughout our community, it's been really heartening to be able to dive into the work that's already going on and the innovation that's within our metro region, to be able to allow the policy and then the general public good that is served by Johnson County to be able to be beneficiaries therefrom. And it's something special about cities. When we started Climate Action KC, we realized early on that this was a unique place to be able to work together towards our shared goals. Cities, counties, metro regions have been the hubs of culture and innovation for hundreds of years. And it's from that proximity of smart minds coming together, working together, steel sharpening steel, allowing cross-company, cross-industry work, allows us to grow new ideas and to incubate those to eventually be the things that help move our community, our society forward. And so it's really exceptional to have this bi-state, multi-10 county region coming together to focus on innovations in the climate space. And one of the things I'm proud that we're able to continue doing today, and appreciate all of you being a part of it.
Well, great. I think it's a really important theme there about the role of the individual and the people inside those companies and cities really making a change, as well as all of you here today and the role that you play. But I wondered, Clay, if you could talk about inside US Engineering. I know you have a really strong employee group, and they were really critical in some of the thinking that you have inside the organization. Could you share some stories about that?
So at US Engineering, we have we do strategic planning every year, and we do it at different levels. We do it at our holding company level, then the operating company level, and there's 4 operating companies at US Engineering. At the holding company level, we made a goal. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, where it was around sustainability, and about 3 years ago, we said, hey, we can actually have an opportunity to as a business, to provide advice to our clients about energy and sustainability. Let's set a goal to go support our clients and their goals around energy and sustainability. So that's what we did. So my company, I have a director of energy and sustainability now, and we are focused completely on providing value to clients in that area. And it was never a debate. It was never, when you look at energy and sustainability, it's not a political, to me, it's not a political thing. It's, you actually can provide more value to businesses, your business, the business that you serve, especially in the service industry. And why would we not want to do that? Why would we not have set goals around that? So we did, and I will tell you, innovation has taken off. If I go back like 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, we had a goal. One of our service technicians at US Engineering still works for us. His name's Daryl. Daryl is a wonderful service technician. We had a goal of creating how do we have a virtual Daryl? We're there right now. We actually have this technology where we have virtual building analytics that essentially can be a service technician virtually in a building, and it's a sustainable solution to building owners. So, did that answer your question?
Partly. I think it is amazing what you're doing on the data analytics side, but I think you mentioned to me that part of the sustainability strategy that came together inside the company was the employees, and that it's called your legacy project, and it's a big part of what drives. Yeah,
so when we first started this, it kind of was a grassroots. Hey, we have a lot of young people in our organization that want to be part of an organization that is growing in this area in sustainability, and we actually created internally what we call the Legacy Project, and that was a grassroots goals of our team members to come up with how does U.S. Engineering become more sustainable, and that was a huge progress, and it's been we believe in it. We believe in it as a business. It's attracted talent for our organization, and it's been great. Yeah.
Great. And I think it's just another part of the business case, and just to kind of summarize where we've been, talking about the importance that it has to people inside your organization, why it matters to them, how you retain and attract talent because of those views, the efficiency inside your organization and how you can save money, and that's dollars and cents, innovation, creating new growth opportunities inside your company, and then thinking about resilience. How do you prepare for risk? How do you account for those unimaginable events when they strike, and how prepared are you for those? So those are just some of the kind of business case items that we've talked about today. But in the spirit of today's conference, we really want you to go away with optimism and think about what is it in your role, whether as a citizen, somebody working for a corporation or a city, what would you take from today in terms of how do you keep the market transformation going, and how do you keep the momentum going in your community? So I'll start with Greg. Could you share some thoughts?
I think hands down, the most important thing you could do is don't let a good conversation pass you by. Clay mentioned that, and it's understandable in today's climate, that this topic of sustainability and climate change can feel political. But hopefully you've heard something here today that will help you understand how to talk about it in apolitical terms. Whether it's the value line of thought, whether it's the efficiency line of thought, or the overall environmental line of thought, right? Try to understand the person who's across from you and pick one of those paths, because I guarantee you, you can have a conversation, a meaningful conversation with someone on those terms nearly every day.
Yeah, I would say, especially like as a business, someone who owns a business or part of a very large business, always ask yourself, what if? Like, what if we could do this? Because the people in your business are super smart, and clients are going to continue to demand more and more from us. And if you can answer those questions, what if we could predict failure for equipment? You know, what if we could do that? I'll bet you in 10 years we'll be able to do that, because we have people that can do that. So think about if you could predict failure for equipment in a building, how much more that would do for the clients that you serve, for those businesses, and also for a sustainable future.
For anyone that works within government or public service, I'd say partnerships are the way that we can move the needle forward the fastest. Partnerships with the private sector, with nonprofit groups, because there is such a hub of innovation here in the metro region. Architecture, engineering, construction. Some of the best and brightest companies in the world are right here in the Kansas City metro region. You don't have to create anything from scratch. Dive into the private sector, invite them to the conversation, allow them to help your public entity move forward faster. They're more than willing to do it, and it's through that partnership we're able to move the needle faster. If you are not in the public sector, you have such an amazing opportunity to shape policy. That's taking just a little bit of time to come to a city council or a county commission meeting. You would not believe how much energy is given to the squeaky wheel. And I have seen it firsthand. If you show up, you have a unique opportunity to affect policy. Take time, find out when decisions are getting made on solar siting, on building performance, on the next project, making sure it has water reclamation and solar. And if you give just that little bit of time, you can have such a marked impact with very little effort. So thank you for getting involved.
Well, and thank you all for listening. I mean, we heard today the most important points are frame the business case, look for partners, and then use advocacy as we move forward. So thanks everyone for listening. That brings us to the end of the panel. Give everyone a round of applause.